Mandy, thank you so much for being on this episode of the Million Dollar Nonprofit Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.
You got it. So, Mandy, I know you work with a lot of nonprofits that are trying to scale above the $1 million mark. And it's
That's
funny because I wrote a whole book about the $1 million nonprofit and how it's so hard for these smaller nonprofits to just hit that number, right? And I know you work with a lot of organizations. I know a lot of our listeners are under that $1 million mark. And your goal with them is to work with them and get them over that $1 million hump. So, with that being said, many small nonprofits feel like they're constantly busy, but still stuck under that $1 million mark. From your experience as an executive director and now a consultant, what's really holding most of these sub $1 million organizations back from scaling, do you feel?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I want to offer to those listening who are working in these smaller nonprofits, really the scale of your organization. I think sometimes, organizations think, oh, these other folks like really have it figured out. And I just need to crack that magic thing to get there. But a lot of larger nonprofits struggle with this as well. And so if you can get a hold of what I call my 4 Ps, it really helps to prioritize both your message externally, but also your time internally. And that is what it takes to get over that hump where you're really focusing on the things that move your mission forward and tuning out the noise that can impede that progress.
And I know that you led an organization that was basically like sat around the $750,000 yearly mark for, a decade before finally breaking through. What finally changed and what did you have to stop doing in order to kind of grow through that growth or that ceiling?
Yeah, so the organization, you're right, it had been around for about, gosh, let's see, about 15 years or so before that decade mark, right? So it wasn't brand new in terms of an organization, but it also wasn't one of these like centennial, we've been around for forever kind of organizations either. And when I became executive director and was able to get a full view of what was happening across the organizations, not just fundraising, because I had spent prior to being an ED, my whole career as an Odeo, which is my company name. It's only development officer, right? Odeos. I know a lot of the people listening probably are not only the ED, but they're also the only development person in the organization. And so having that full view of what the entire team, where their focus was, really allowed me to see, oh my gosh, we are spread too thin. This is a powerful team of really intelligent folks. And they have so much to offer in ways of moving this mission forward, but they're just literally spread too thin. We're doing too much. And so I dialed us all the way back and really thought about, on the surface, it seems very apparent what this organization stands for and why it exists, but we had never really clearly defined it for ourselves and for the external audience and tuned in, right? I became ED of that organization in 2021. So we all remember what happened in 2020. And that really gave us a forced opportunity to look at, okay, what are we doing? What's mission critical? Let's focus there. And then as we were emerging out of it, I transitioned from the development director into the executive director role and was able to see these are the pieces that need to permanently fall away in order for us to stay focused in on mission. And that started with defining, why do we exist? What are we here for? And let's ensure that we are gut checking our current reality, right? What makes us unique? Who do we serve? And really defining that problem statement and putting it down on paper so that the entire team had the common language around why we were all there. And that from there, we took a look at our programs and really dialed in on which of these serve that purpose statement, right? That problem statement. And that changed things for us because all of a sudden now internally, we were all playing from the same playbook so that externally, as we've developed our plans and invitations to give, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, everyone got it, right? We were all on the same page first. And so I think that if you're listening and you think you have your problem statement down pat, gut check it with a couple of folks and see, is this clear? Does this make sense? Are we the only ones doing this, or what makes our solution unique? Right? So that if you don't have it down pat internally and document it too, can't just live up in your brain, you are never going to be able to clearly communicate it, whether it's a one-on-one conversation with an individual donor, whether you're pitching a corporate sponsor, you're writing a grant narrative. It's the central, foundational point from which everything else grows.
And I would have to think that too, when you have it documented like this, and we're going to go into your 4P framework here in a minute.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to say anything about it
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
But how many organizations do you feel kind of that you work with don't have a plan at all? And second part of that question is once you do have a plan and everybody's following it, is it easier for growth because everybody in their normal day-to-day life is now promoting the organization in the same style, the wording, they're saying the same things, and they're just getting in front of more people?
Yeah. So, tackling your first part of your question is, I think most of the organizations who have a strategic plan, right? They think they have one. They have that old binder on the shelf version of it, right? Where they go through a whole process. And a lot of times when I'm working with clients or prospective clients, I get a little bit of resistance at the point where it's like, well, we know what we're supposed to be doing, or right, we have these ideas of what we're supposed to be doing, but I don't just need another document that tells me what to do. I need to be able to put it into action. And that's the part I would say almost everyone that I encounter in terms of the clients that I work for don't have that part of it, right? So it's either living up in their heads or it's on a Google Doc that they haven't touched in months or years, right? They complete the thing, they complete the plan, and then it sits there and it's not operationalized. And I would say, again, from organizations super, super small to those that are pretty large, that's a common thing that I think many of us have a sense or an idea of what a strategic plan should look like, but then it just sits, right? It feels like something to check off the to-do list, and we're not actively looking back at it. So I think it's a lot. It's common. So again, if folks are listening, they're like, "Oh my gosh, one more thing that I need to be doing that I'm not doing." You're not alone, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated, right? But it needs to be something that you can operationalize, that you can check back in on, and that you plan to check back in on it. Um, and then for the other portion of the question, I would say that, man, when we did this at the organization that we've been referencing, the one that was sub a million for about a decade, and we put it into place, it was so energizing for our team. Some of them had been around longer than I had. And gosh, it's been a while now, but I know that some of the things that they would say are like, man, this just gives a new purpose to what I'm doing. I get it. I understand some of these sort of like disparate activities that they felt like they were doing. It all started to make sense to them. So it was super energizing and very motivating, morale boosting as a team to be able to see it all again on paper, right? It was a digital document. Um, but it had these like unintended outcomes, I think, right? Beyond just being able to move the mission forward, it really just helped to build some cohesiveness on the team. And that was very, very cool to see.
Yeah, I can imagine. And one of the things that I can see going on a lot lately is, these organizations using AI to create a strategic plan or a
Mhm.
playbook, right? But then it kind of, I think, does what you say, where it just goes and it sits in a Google Drive and nobody ever looks at it again. Like, yep, I checked off a box, I have one, but they don't actually follow it. And I'm guilty of this in our companies too. It's like I'll create a playbook and then I'll never share it with whoever's going to be in charge of that playbook, or we'll just never open it again. How do you create the plan, and then make sure that these organizations are consistently looking at it and evolving it and actually following through on it?
Yeah, so one of the tools that I develop with my clients, I call it the mission monitor, and I'm a firm believer in whether you say what you measure moves or what you measure matters, right? There's a million different sayings that go along with that, but I'm a firm believer in that, and so I think narrative style strategic plans can be really important for use cases like, again, building a grant narrative, or sharing out in a storytelling kind of a way what you're doing with your board. But the mission monitor is actually, it's a series of Google Sheets, right, that I create in a Google workbook. And on the first tab is a dashboard. And what that dashboard does is it has some very specific KPIs, key performance indicators that we're measuring against on it follows the 990, right? Your admin, your fundraising, your programs. Um, and it helps to ensure that everyone across the entire team has access to, again, if you're a team of one or you're a team of 10, 15, 50, it doesn't matter. Everyone can see what are we moving progress towards. And in order to implement this piece, right, we look at on a monthly basis measuring those KPIs. And then on a quarterly basis, you can take a look and say, okay, are we on track? Does this make sense still? Do we need to adjust? Did some like incredible windfall happen where now we want to shift focus on this from this area to that area? But that mission monitor really allows for the entire team. It's it's an open document that anyone can access at any time, but that there are very purposeful, if you do a staff meeting, what have you, can develop when you check on this dashboard. But there are purposeful points at which everyone has to measure, right? And it lays out exactly what are we measuring it? Who's responsible for measuring the thing? Here's the column that you actually put all the information into. When you start to get a little more sophisticated with it, you can forecast out and say, here's what we think is going to happen. And then we're going to see, does this actually happen, right? And what do we need to shift or change in order to adjust or achieve those goals? And that sheet alone is so transformational for being able to keep your eye on the ball, because that's the missing part, right? We get so caught up in the day to day. We live in our inboxes or in meetings or what have you, right? There's a million different things that pull us away. But you need to have that central place that everyone can go back to. And as an executive director, I loved it because it was my board report. Right. I was able to, it was such a multifunction, multi-purpose tool where I could literally just link out the view version of this mission monitor and then create some narrative around what my board members were seeing. And then I was done, right? I didn't have to spend hours and hours and try and get in touch with this person or that person to get the information I needed. And man, that piece alone was very transformational, because if a development person needed to pop in, they were having a conversation with the donor and they needed to see a key metric that we hit in programs right before they were walking into a donor meeting, it was right there for them. If I was up late writing a grant, it was right there for me, right? So that mission monitor is a huge tool. And there's some other sheets on there that help with some moves management pieces with foundations, corporations, and individuals that I build right into that workbook as well. Because that is, again, another way to make sure that, like, one-stop shop, we need to stop digging through all of our various tools and resources and have a place that everything lives, that we can regularly check back to.
Yeah, and if everything's organized and it's easy for people to just follow, even on a daily basis, to kind of come in, have a little checklist, and kind of knock things out, it'll be easier for them to implement the plan that you guys create. So you mentioned the 4P framework earlier on. Can you walk us through what that looks like in plain English for all the
Yes.
small nonprofits listening right now?
Absolutely. It's super simple. And pieces of this may be things that you've heard before. But what I find is that we skip over it sometimes, right? We rush right to the ask. We rush right to, oh my gosh, but we need money in the door today. And that's just simply not how it works, right? But if you slow down, get this stuff right, you can warp speed your mission impact. So first P is problem. Touched on this a little bit earlier, right? You need to understand and be able to clearly articulate what problem is it that your organization solves. So we need to know who's affected, what are they facing, what's at risk here, right? So if we don't solve this issue, what are the consequences of not taking action? And then research, right? We've got the anecdotal, here's what we see, but then research shows that And here's our key points about why this really is indeed a problem and why your solution works to make progress towards that problem. So the first P is problem. Next up, you have programs. You need to be able to very clearly articulate and tie back to that problem statement. How are you solving these problems, right? Why are you the experts that I should give my money to? And I really ask for organizations that, especially folks who have these beautiful, brilliant ideas where they want to serve a mission or a cause, really stop and think before you start a nonprofit, or even if you are in the midst of you've got your 501c3 and you're doing the thing. Why are you the person that someone should give their money to? It's got to be very clear, very distinct. And if you can, right, depending on how long you've been around, provable, right? So that's your or your programs, excuse me. And don't mix up, right? For some of my clients who don't have this very clear, we'll go through a whole logic model of what are our outcomes and our outputs, right? Don't get bogged down in all the activities that you do, projects and activities and tasks does not a program make, right? We have to be able to pull it all together in a cohesive way that articulates a program. And then plan. So plan for me really boils down to something I call the financial story of impact, where folks need to get really, really clear about their numbers, right? On the expense side of things, they need to be able to clearly show what goes straight into programs. And then what does it take to power those programs? Don't shy away from the admin and the fundraising, right? I'm sure you've had folks on before talking about the overhead myth and how we all have to be really careful about that. But I have found that when I'm talking with donors, if I can explain it to them and help them see this is what powers the program and the mission impact that you care about, they're really receptive to it, right? So really having a clear understanding of where is your money going. And then on the top side, right, a lot of us have that down. We have where is the money going down. What we don't have as clearly articulated is a visualization of where's the money coming from. How are we funded, right? So you should be able to say X% comes from individuals, Y from corporate, Z from foundation, or there's earned income piece in there too, right? Be very clear, especially for organizations that do have an earned income strategy. You need to know those breakdowns so that you can help people see, yes, we are a nonprofit. Yes, we do need philanthropic income to make this whole thing go. It's not just what you see on the surface in terms of paid, right? Paid programming. So your plan is a really robust series of, there's different worksheets or slides, right? There's different ways to show it, but you need to be able to tell that financial story of impact and have your numbers down really straight. Step one is knowing what's happening right now. You get like 5 gold stars for me if you can say what you're hoping to do next year, and unlimited gold stars if you know what you're hoping to do a year from then, right? We know, again, having lived through the pandemic, like I don't think it's a very worthy exercise to go too far beyond that. You might have a long range vision, of course, but in terms of true operational financial plans of where are you hoping to go, that can be really impactful when you're getting to the point of, trying to get multi-year commitments from people and things like that. So that's your plan. And then the fourth P is purposeful investment. We need to invite folks, whether you're sending out an email campaign, a direct mail piece, right? You're sending postcards through the mail or a letter through the mail, or if you're sitting down one-on-one with a donor, you're writing a grant narrative, a corporate pitch. Again, this serves all audiences. You need to be able to invite someone in to make their most impactful gift, right? And that looks different for different people. And so some of the tools that I help my clients to develop are gift charts and how to use those gift charts in a really meaningful way to invite in people's best gifts, right? What I have found in using that last P, right, is that a lot of times donors don't have a sense of what you actually need. They may look at that and say, oh my gosh, I had no idea you needed gifts of $1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, depending on the scale, right? I had no idea that this was growing that big and that you were doing all this incredible work. On the other end, I have definitely had conversations with some donors who are like, well, we need to think bigger, right? Like if this is your floor, or if this is your ceiling, excuse me, that really should be your floor. And to those people, I say, wonderful. Okay, help us get there, right? With your investment. But it's a great tool to be able to engage in dialogue with your donors, so that they can understand that their gift really is essential to the organization. It's very impactful, right? Because $1,000 to one organization is a drop in the bucket at another. $100 at some organizations is very impactful, and it's an absolute drop in the bucket at others. And so if you can convey how their money, not just in terms of the amount, but how their intentional reflection on what they're contributing to your cause, if you can convey that to a donor, they get very excited because they really feel like you're listening, you get it, and you appreciate what they're doing for you and for the organization. So problem, program, plan, and purposeful investment. If you get that down, your mind is going to be blown by, one, how much clearer everything feels to you, but then two, how you can then go out and have such a, you know, so much more meaningful interactions with staff, with beneficiaries, with donors. It's very, very cool to see. And it's pretty immediate, the changes that you see once you get this stuff down.
Well, I think when you just get clear on what everybody is trying to focus on and the goals that you're trying to achieve, everybody in the organization is going to be moving forward at the same pace. So, if a nonprofit leader is listening right now that only has the capacity for implementing one of the four P's today, which one typically creates the biggest shift early on?
Oh, I think that's a really tough question to answer, because I think they all are so interconnected, right? So I would say if you only have one thing that you can accomplish today, start at the beginning, right? Get that problem statement down, because sometimes that reveals to people, we've been doing one thing, but really this is what we're actually about. And so that can be enough to unlock a, like, oh, moment, right? Um, and I think it also can get people really clear on a path towards, just naturally, you're going to start to think about, do our programs actually reflect back to that thing that we said we were going to do? So I would start there for certain. I think one of the ones that can take the most time is the plan piece, right? And especially if you're not a numbers person, it can feel daunting. I was not a numbers person. I mean, right? I was raising money, so I was a numbers person in that way, but I was not a budgets and QuickBooks, ugh, all of that I was not interested in until I started this work, right? Of really getting clear. And then it got exciting. Then it was like, oh my gosh, the clarity around this really, really helps me to have that conversation in a totally different way. And that, I think, motivates people, but it can be the piece that's daunting. So I would say, really, start with problem. But if you, I guess, even dialing back from that, if you start with anything, look at your calendar and find 4 days, right? And it doesn't have to be full days, but find 4 days where you can tackle each of these steps and make a little bit of progress, um, so that you are moving in that direction. Because otherwise, you're going to keep being in that grind, and you're going to keep knowing that there is capability and capacity to do more and to do better, and not taking action on it is going to start to feel heavier and heavier. So I guess first step would be, look at that calendar, right? And find the time, because you have it. You have to create it, and you have to say no to things that are just sucking up energy, that aren't really moving towards this thing that can just totally transform your organization. Again, we went from 750 in the 4 years that I was executive director. We went from 750 to almost $2.1 million. That was our budget right when I was leaving, and we were on the path to hitting that. We hit, I think it was like 940, 1.2, 1.8, something like that, right? Like the trajectory was huge because there was so much clarity around these things.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the importance of clarifying a financial story of impact earlier. What's a common mistake you see nonprofits making when they talk to their donors about money or even growth?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. We could do a whole hour on myths, right? That fundraisers and nonprofit folks tell themselves. I think I would say what encapsulates everything is that too many people are making assumptions. They're making assumptions that the donor knows even that the organization is a nonprofit, and then therefore what does that mean? It means that we need philanthropic investment. When we're so baked into the internal culture of nonprofit organizations, we make all these assumptions that other people understand how they work. And the simple truth is they don't, right? If you aren't entrenched in this world and living it every day, there are pieces that the folks that you're talking to are going to miss, even if, right, they're a funder or a corporate social responsibility person who talks to nonprofits all the time, or a philanthropist who makes donations all the time. There are nuances that they're going to miss. So don't make any assumptions that folks know what you need, what it's going to take to get there, and how that person can be a part of that journey with you. Of course, people make assumptions as well about, like, oh, I don't know if the donor is going to be able to give this much. Guess what? I don't know that I know of anyone who's offended by you thinking that they are wealthier than they actually are. So don't be afraid to have that conversation, and be very, come to it from a humble place of, I'm really excited to share, and what we're doing here, and want to know if you might be interested, right, in learning more about this. And that can be a jumping off point. But don't make any assumptions that they know what the problem is, what the programs are, what your plan is. They very likely are missing some crucial information that when you unlock it and you find that piece of crucial information that they were missing, their donation goes from $100 a year to $20,000 a year. True story, happened to me, right? And it's like, whoa, that's when you know that this is working. This model really works.
Well, Mandy, this has been a great conversation. How can people get into your world and how can they learn more about the 4P framework?
Yeah, so go to Hello Odeo, and that's ODEO.com/ 4P formula, the number 4P formula. And you can get a free download of an ebook that I wrote that goes into a lot more depth on the 4P formula. So grab that free copy, and then LinkedIn as well. You can find me on LinkedIn, just Mandy Moody. And I would love to connect and to hear about kind of where your listeners are with all of this, right? And other challenges they may be having. Um, and let's connect. Let's get things moving, because people are doing some really incredible work. And I know you can do it. I know you can get past that $1 million mark. And I'd love to be on that journey with them.
Well, that's great. Everybody listening, please reach out to Mandy. You'll find all of her contact information below in the description, in the bio. And I think one of the big things is once you break that $1 million mark, things start to get actually probably a little bit easier. And it's just that mindset of, hey, I don't know if I can ever make $1 million in my nonprofit. But once you have a framework and you start implementing the steps, getting there is very achievable. And, that's exactly what you do with the people that you work with in these organizations. So, Mandy, thank you so much for being on this episode of the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast.
Thanks again, Tom. It was really a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you.